So we're talking about um, the philosophical, the mindset shift from project thinking to product thinking. Brian, I'm going to throw this one at you to start with. Why do you think this matters?
Oh, that's a super cool question. And before I kick that off with an answer, Shane, and I appreciate the question, just want to welcome everybody to our conversation today. So, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, it's good to have everyone on board, wherever you may be. Now, in relation to the question, Shane, I think it's important because we've changed. When we talk about agility, when we talk about agile, we talk about product, they're very symbiotic. They're tied closer together, and I often refer to agility. I go on a bit of a tangent here. Agile as being the vehicle to help realize a product. But I think gone are the days when we would just have products. You know, now it's about how do we actually develop something that people love? How do we develop something that people want? How do we develop something that so that we're closer in tune with the product as opposed to just giving them something, which means then from the shift moving away from say project mentality, which is very output focused, if you will, and I think we might touch on this a little bit later on, is moving towards something that is really about let's embrace this product. How do we make it better? Things like Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal, or if you look at, say, Facebook or Meta, uh, perhaps Google and their range of suite of products. People invested in this, you know, people use them, they're on the daily, if you will. So how do we make that experience more meaningful for a consumer, a customer, a person, somebody that's new, somebody that's older, somebody that is uh, perhaps tech savvy, somebody that's not. So how do we make something that people are going to embrace? I mean, ultimately, for a lot of product and organizations, it's about the bottom line. But along with that, to get to our bottom line or to the bottom line you want to get to, you got to have an experience that will just grab people, just pull them in, and just allow them to feel like that the product and them. I wouldn't say almost one because that's kind of getting into the force, right? We're using the force, if you will, to do that. But it's not quite there. But it's almost like that. You almost have this relationship with the product that this is my go-to. So I guess that's what I would see in terms of that shift and why that's important, because now the expectation or the bar has changed. I mean, Shane, I'm not sure about you. I'm pretty sure, but you and I are around roughly the same-ish, vintage-ish. But we'll remember our dial-up modems from back in the day, uh, 2400, 9600, and I forgot what goes after that. Eventually topping out at 52K. You know, so with that comes a more expectation, increased expectation, speed, and connectivity to the internet, and all the information that comes with that. Same sort of mentality now applies. Right? We see it now in terms of content that is consumed, information that we need, and the way we would conduct business. So that's kind of what I'm seeing at the moment, Shane.
Mhm. Okay, so we're we're talking there about software intensive products, and I think it's quite important that we do distinguish.
Mm,
Um, there are contexts where the construct of a project makes sense, because if we think what a
I,
project is, it is a defined piece of work, um, defined start, defined end, both of which might change, which is intended to produce something, and the makers of that thing would hand it off to other people to use it. So if we think in the civil engineering space,
mm,
in the even sometimes in the sort of software outsourcing space, it
mm,
would make sense that you would do that. You've got this group of specialists who put the thing together and they hand it off. But for most organizations today, that is not actually how we work. We're our companies today, our organizations are dependent upon these long-lived underlying products, whether they're the internal tools that we use if we're a banking organization, insurance company, a government department, those tools that are made available to the staff, but also the things that face our customers, they need to evolve in this rapidly changing world. And yeah, we know that the world is changing faster and faster, and the pressures for change and so forth. And that means we have to be able to adapt. So that fundamental shift in thinking, it's hard.
Mm.
There's a whole lot of challenges around um, budgets and approvals and so forth. We'll probably come back to some of those. But what does this what does this mean to an organization?
Mm. That's a good question. And I guess it would depend on, to some degree, on their context, their maturity, if you will, their willingness to embrace. And we're getting into almost the cultural realm with this. But what does it mean? And I've worked with a federal government organization, working with a federal government organization, and they've adopted a shift, and they're moving to a product space. And in this federal government space, they've decided that, look, we're very project centric. We want to move to a more product centric view of the world. And it has its challenges because with that, you need to shift the thinking. You need to shift the way the culture is changed. This is essentially the organization was structured. If you apply Conway's law, for example, right, and you look at the way the information flows, it's very hierarchical. It just flows like this, right? So when you look at it in that context, they wanted to move away from that so that they are more responsive, they're more nimble, they're able to think big picture, they're able to think strategically. How do they position themselves? Because this government organization also interacts with a lot of similar type of organizations across the world. So if that's the case, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, there's a lot of uh, federal government requirements on that as well. And there's a lot of legislation, of course, being federal government. So what it means is they also interact a lot with customers. Now, has a very profound effect because when you think about this, and I have to be very careful how I phrase this, but when people have different thoughts and ideas around products, then they need to be able to respond appropriately. And if they can respond appropriately, then say here in Australia, in the federal government space, then we're able to as you mentioned, adapt. And then as you mentioned also, Shane, in that really cool summary that you just gave, the speed. And I was wondering around that, and I'm going to flip this question about, so because a thought came into my head when you were saying that. So, so I hope you don't mind me saying the Shane, but to you, how important is speed? Or is it, are we biting too much, or are we biting too much into speed?
Be gracefully responsive.
Mm,
Be fast, but don't hurry. Josh Kirievsky's work on the joy of agility. Speed on its own is not a useful metric.
mm,
Speed to value is. Time to value. Now, this becomes hard because we have to identify what value really means. What is value for the organization? What is value for the stakeholders? What is value for the customers? There are models out there, the DVF, desirable, feasible, valuable, and so forth. Should we do it? Can we do it? Will they buy it? Um, so it has to start with value, and this I think is one of those fundamental philosophical mindset shifts. If we think of the way most organizations have worked, um, and particularly with that project culture,
Mm.
It's the iron triangle: on time, on budget, on scope. Value gets lost
Mm.
when we make this shift to value first. What is it worth versus what does it cost? We have to be good, responsible corporate citizens. We can't turn around and say, cost doesn't matter. But that cost to value relationship, that time to value relationship, and there are techniques. We've got all of the learning from the last 30 plus years of things like lean startup and so forth, the concept of the minimum viable product, the probably the most misused term in product management today. Most organizations that I come across, and when we talk about the MVP, what they mean is the minimum crappy thing they can get away with,
All right.
not the thing that will help us to learn. But if we get past that and we think about what that really actually means, that time to learning, time to value, and then being able to adapt and respond at a rate that keeps us competitive. So this is a key thing. Yeah,
Mm.
we can't. Our, the world around us is moving fast, so we need to be able to adapt and respond quickly. Now, the in the software intensive space, we've got the tools that help us do that. But in general, in knowledge worker space today, we can and do. We're able to adapt and respond quicker. I would argue that the physical space, so things like civil engineering and so forth, even there, the tooling is getting quicker, getting better and quicker. But there are physical limits to the speeding, the what we can do in terms of speeding up. But when they're certainly in that software intensive space, we can adapt and respond quickly. The other thing to think about is what is too fast?
Mm.
And this is something where we have to understand our customer environment. I worked with an organization who are building software for farm management. Um, we got to a point where we were releasing upgrades of a product that the farmers used, and we could release on a daily basis. We've gone from a yearly release cycle, and after a lot of work and a lot of changes, we were down to that almost continuous delivery. We could release on a daily basis. We didn't. We used the sort of fairly standard 2 week Scrum iteration cycle, and we got feedback from the farmers that was too fast. It was too, even small changes every fortnight was too much. So we ended up doing regular release cycles of a quarter, and that was a pace at which they were comfortable. And and here we had all of the things like feature flags and so forth, so that we could enable features for specific customers. We were able to, if needed, get something out overnight. So we
Mm.
had the benefit of that, and there was a configuration, there was an infrastructure needed to enable that, but it worked. We had, customer interaction, customer satisfaction was high, employee engagement was high, profitability went up, and so so where there was something needed quickly, we had it, and then we had the cadence that worked for the customer. So we were able to get the best of both worlds in that context.
Brilliant. And I love that point because when you talk about that, understanding the value and speed to value and so forth, oftentimes I've seen this, when we're in projects and we've all been there. I'm pretty sure everyone's on the call. We've all been there. Projects, man, we just boom, hit the milestones, bang, 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 deliver something. Okay, see you later. All right. And there might be a month warranty period at the end of it. But don't care what the customers say. We'll tweak it later. Somebody else is going to look after it, but we've delivered our thing, right? And coming back into the product space is about owning the entire thing, right? And that's really, and I loved how you said that because it's really about us understanding the customer needs and wants. It's not just about the technology. And you prompted a thought in my head because recently my wife and I we got back from the beautiful islands of Samoa. So anyone from Samoa on the call, aloha. Um, I remember when we got there, and I was actually quite. We got in early in the morning. This was about a week ago. So Faleolo International Airport, we got in and we got a rental car, went to the rental car place. I booked this online the night before and I walked in and the person that was serving me, and there was just one other couple in front of me, but there's a person who served me, went through a list which was written down on a piece of paper. Right. So obviously, it had a computer there, it had stuff there, but written down on a piece of paper. So I was going, oh, that's a really low tech way of doing that. So interesting. Couldn't find me, right? And it was probably because it was going through a third party booking and so forth. But we went through and everything was very manually done, written out on the form, had to sign this, sign that, nothing was printed out, but it worked. Right? It was almost like you were there, and if they had to go and print stuff off and use the computer, sure, we would have got some efficiencies, but I think what we would have lost is a degree of connection, right? Because this person obviously knew the spiel and knew how to go through things, made it super, super clear for me, right? Rather than just printing something off, here you go, pay your deposit, whatever it is, right? It was that they had built the connection, built the rapport, I understood what was going on, walked out the door, got the car, and we were off and running for a good week. When we returned back, it was the simplest thing ever because they had already had this folder, they had the deposit ready there. Um, did the check of the car, bang. I'd say I was in there for 2 minutes, if that. Now, again, we could have gone, say, anywhere in Australia, New Zealand, or wherever else, perhaps in the Western world, and we would have got printouts and all that, and it would have seemed efficient. But this one was just seamless in the way of the engagement with the customer. So I really, really like that. So, Shane, another thought that came to mind is, and it's tied back to something you said a little bit earlier. It seems like from a corporate perspective, whether we're talking about software stuff, whether we're talking about business stuff, or just the organization in general, leaders seem to be embracing this. They go, oh, we need to do product stuff. We need to be product focused. We need to be more product centric, right? But in your experience, what do you see as actually driving that? Is this just a fad? Is this something to jump on the bandwagon? What is it?
It is a fundamental recognition of the shift that has happened around us.
Mm,
Yeah. It's the logical extension and outgrowth of the work that created or not created that resulted in software in the Agile Manifesto, but it's also in organization design, in ways of working. There's been this continuous and evolutionary um, set of changes. I'd look at Lalou's work moving to the moving more to green and teal organizations because the nature of work is different today. If we think of a lot of our management structures and principles, they were designed for the 20th century uh, factory environment. Sadly,
hmm
our education systems are designed for the 20th century factory environment. We're no longer in that space. We can't, our customers, our consumers are more demanding. They
mm.
want, it is not good enough that, what color can it be? Well, black. What color do you want your Ford? Okay, we're going back 100 but years. No, the consumer wants. And if we don't meet the consumer where they are, there are 9 competitors who are popping up right now, and they will.
Mm.
And we haven't mentioned AI, but of course the evolution of the generative AI tools have enabled this. We see there is the one person unicorn company is a potential now. So the competitive landscape has changed. The customer demand has changed. The employee demand has changed.
Mm,
I don't want to work in a 20th century management organization. I do not accept the need for that rigid hierarchical flow. And if I'm feeling like that, I know that my grandchildren who are going into the workplace now, they are looking at organizations with a very, very different slant to what I
mm,
had, to even what my children had. So our organizations need to respond. Tools, and we've got things out there, things like team topologies from Matthew Skelton, Manuel Pias. Um, the work of John Smart on better values, sooner, safer, happier. There's good models out there that we can draw upon now, but they're models. They're not templates. Don't be a
mm.
template zombie. You've got to take this thinking and apply it in your own context. But we have to be able to do that, adapt and respond to our our employees, our customers, the wider societal stakeholders. So the demands on our organization, in my feeling, really are pushing us. So and this is it's disruptive change.
Mm,
And we've
mm.
seen it as disruptive change. For the last nearly 30 years, this has been moving through industry. So we're talking about stuff that is not new, but that is now, I want to say it's mandatory to our organizations today. It's not optional to adopt, to shift your way of thinking, because if you don't, you won't have the customers.
Nice. Would it be fair to say that product is leadership? This is a leadership,
Ooh,
perhaps, situation. What do you think?
is product leadership? Well, is leadership a product is one, but leadership, there is, above the product is the portfolio, and that's where leadership really lives. That senior leadership in the organization is really managing the portfolio of, these are all of the things that we do, and making sure that they are complementary and uh, not interchangeable but adaptive and meshed well. And then within the product streams, we're delivering on that overall vision. Leadership is vision.
Mm,
Leadership is clarity. Leadership is not micromanagement.
nice. Brilliant. I love how you said that because one of the things that I'm working with a financial institution at the moment, organization, rather large one here in Australia, and working with their product folk. I often talk about that the space of being whether it's, you call yourself a product owner or a product manager, whatever, you're in the product space, but you're in the leadership space, right? So
Mm.
I love how you mentioned the senior leadership, right? That's the degree of leadership. That's the ultimately for the organization, working that portfolio. But then there's that more tactical junior level, I guess, leadership to some degree of their product space, understanding the value. How do we connect the vision of our product to the customer, to our teams? We get that buy-in and so forth. You know, start with why, Simon Sinek type stuff, right? But when we're talking about product, I think one of the things I see perhaps that have been missed to some degree is that, and I loved how you alluded to this a little bit earlier, so I'll hold that tangent, is that this is very much a contextual thing, right? So it's not a cookie cutter. Here you go. Follow this template like a zombie. Bang, you'll be a product organization. Good job. See you later. Right? It's about adapting, improvising, overcoming, looking for your space in which things will work, things might not work. How do we change that? And that's leadership. And then also making those challenging calls that we might need to make as a product person. So when I'm thinking about that, and you talked about those different models, which I find really, really fascinating because those models give us a basis, but it's not the sum total of everything. But it often makes me think about when we're moving into an organization, or both of us, we've been working with different organizations around this product space. What are some of the challenges you've seen in the adoption of a shift towards more product thinking?
Oof.
Where do you start?
First one, you will almost inevitably hit a funding model problem.
Mm,
The traditional annual budget, 6 months, 12 months in advance, we're trying to hypothesize what the world is going to be like next year and go to a funding group, whether it's the accounts department, whether it's the budget committee or whomever, hat in hand and say, we think we're going to do this, give us this much money.
mm,
We don't know what's going to happen next year. But we also can't be irresponsible and just say, give us money, leave us alone.
yes.
So we have to switch, fundamentally switch that funding and governance model. That is, in my experience, this is the biggest challenge. We may, within a single area, and we saw this with Agile for IT. We got the agility going. We solved the bottleneck, which was building software and getting it ready to produce. And we hit the organizational barriers around inertia, particularly funding models, role-based incentives, for instance. We put people together in a collaborative cross-functional team. We want them to work well together, and then we set up an incentive structure that ranks them against each other.
Mm,
You have just destroyed collaboration. Your unit of value delivery is not the individual, it is the team.
mm,
So what this team looks like. And in the product space, the team, typically led by a product owner, product manager, and we can, what's the distinction in those roles? Of course, that varies from organization to organization. But somebody who has that product vision that aligns with that bigger organizational vision, where the value organization, the value management. So the shift from the PMO to the VMO, the value management organization, with value streams that deliver those products. And the whole stream, everybody in that stream is interlinked and woven together and works together to deliver that value. And the incentive needs to be aligned around that. So that's one of the biggest, two big things: funding, incentives, that shift to how we organize people to these collaborative cross-functional teams. We're
mm.
used to the role-based silos. We need to break those silos, and well, the reality is you will end up with a different pipe, a different type of silo, which is the product. And something to be cautious of is we get the contention between those product streams.
Yes.
Where they don't collaborate, they compete. And this is where that value management office sitting at the top, making sure that, and having the courage to know when, hey, this product has run its course.
Yes. 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 Sorry. I loved how you said this, and sorry to jump in there on this, Shane, but it's the dichotomy in that product space, right? Between that degree of predictability and we set things up, and this thing over here where we can just do stuff. But with this, it's also having that going from, hey, look, we work in one particular space and silo, and now we want to be able to do our own thing, but we still need to tie all of this together. So one organization I'm working with, we're having that same sort of question at the moment, right? When we think about our prioritization, we're thinking about it in our particular silo. We're not necessarily thinking about what's good for everyone, for the organization as a whole. What are those bigger priorities? Everything else then flows with that. I also loved how you said, and you touched on that around the people thing, the people side of it. Again, in your vast travels and experience, do you think, let me reframe it, how important is the people aspect when we talk about product? Because we've talked about the tools, we've talked about some of the challenges, we've talked about leadership, but the people aspect of product, how important do you think that is?
He tangata, he tangata, he tangata.
I
And for those who are not from New Zealand, that's it's the people, it's the people, it's the people. If we don't get the people stuff right, nothing else matters.
mm,
That's your foundation. It's the that's the key. It's bringing people on this journey with us. It's recognizing that it will disrupt existing power structures. It's acknowledging that in that former siloed structure, the middle manager role, for instance,
mm,
had a lot of power. In a product value stream, well, we don't want to lose these people. They bring great organizational knowledge. They bring depth of experience. So we have to mesh them in. But we all need to understand what it means to work in that cross-functional collaborative manner versus the hierarchical structure. So as that, if I'm a middle manager shifting into this space, my role is going to change fundamentally. In fact, pretty much everyone's role is going to change fundamentally. And bringing people on that journey,
mm,
incredibly important. If we don't get that, what we end up with is the lipstick on the pig. We say we're a product organization, but it still needs an 18-month approval cycle for a small change to our product to get into the hands of our customers. We can build it in 3 days, but it takes 9 months to get to before we start building it, and then another 6 months after it's built to get to the release point. Because we haven't actually changed the silos, we've just changed the labels.
mm.
This is where a lot of the frameworks fall down. They feel so attractive. I can just take this and apply it as an organizational template. But if you look underneath those, all of the authors of all of the frameworks give strong advice about don't just take this and copy it. And start with the people and understand the culture changes that are needed. And you read any of the authors of these frameworks, that's what they're advising. Unfortunately, that's hard work. And if you're a consultant who makes money from implementing a framework, it's a whole lot easier just to do the rubber stamp. But the organization has to really embrace this change.
Mm,
Because we got to go from the doing of the practices to the being, to the way of thinking around our new ways of working. And these are new ways of working. They're different ways of working.
mm. I like that. I like that because again, emphasizing that point around the people, it's a different way of working, a new way of working. It's it's about us shifting our thinking and our approach, and it takes time. Like organizational change is just runs on the board. It takes time. You've got to build the innings. It's going to be something that it's a long-term thing. One of the things that um, one of the challenges I've seen a lot of, particularly when we shift, right? It gets messy. You shift from say, oh, 1st of June, boom, we're now agile. Good luck. Or we're going product. Good luck. See you later. But when we shift that, what happens is that the invisible work is still invisible, but it's got a different label on it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I often talk about when I'm working with product folk is that we need to be able to make our work visible. And one of the things I often say is that invisible work is a capacity killer. Right?
Yeah.
But if I tie that into what we do as product, value work is also a value killer because if we don't see the work, we don't understand what value
Mm-hmm.
actually looks like for us. So making things visible, which means that we need to have those conversations, which means that we need to work together as teams, like real teams, not just a bunch of people pulled together and say you're a team, and we haven't figured out how to build that. So one of the things that I often think about when we're doing that, and there's a question that's just popped into my head for you, Shane. We've talked about our product. We've talked about some of the leadership. We've talked about the challenges. We've talked about the people. But I'm a brand new organization, right? I'm one of the 9 startups, all right? I'm that lone wolf. I'm going to change the landscape of something. Where do I start with this? What am I going to do?
Well, if you're starting from scratch, if you are the true startup, well, just start.
Good point.
But if you're and most of our audience are going to be in the position of, hey, we're already in a siloed organization. We've got the everything's in place already. Maybe we've adopted one of the agile frameworks and somebody's imposed safe or something like that on us, or Scrum at scale, or pick your model. Where do we go? How do we adapt to this? Um, the first thing is think of what are the real value streams? So
Mm,
look at, yeah, ignore the org chart. What are the value streams? What are the end-to-end flow of value to our customers? So we start at the customer, we start at the outcome, and we work backwards, and we identify every single stage handoff interaction in that flow as it exists at the moment. And then we say, okay, and we pick one. Do not try and do this to the whole organization tomorrow. You cannot do the tomorrow we are the product org. Sorry, it doesn't work. It might look good on a PowerPoint presentation, but it does not work for the people. So you pick one of those, and then you pull that out and you make it a value stream. You make this is your first value stream. And we look at it and then we optimize it. Where is, and this is value stream mapping from lean manufacturing. What are the value added activities? What are the waste activities? What are the wait times, delays, and so forth? And we look at that, and then we optimize, and we bring this to the point where we now have a single value stream that is starting to perform. And then we look for the next one. And we might spread some of those ideas, allow some of the people to even shift because they've experienced this, so they're becoming and yeah, you want to try and find the folks that are keen in that first value stream. And then over time, and it can be done, it doesn't need to take years and years and years, but it can't be done in a month.
Yes.
You're gonna, you know, we've been involved and we've seen so many agile transformations where we come in, we do 2 days of sheep dip training, we give you a certificate, and hey, you and I issue certificates where we are accredited to deliver certificates, and we dub people, thou art now agile, go away and make it happen. No, that's never worked. Yes, that foundational training incredibly important, but all that's doing is giving people a starting point. So find that value stream, weave it together, and then look at the next one and the next one, and at each step, learn, adapt.
Mm. I like
There's a
that too.
question in there from Denise about
Mm.
uh, the can really large organizations do this? Yes, they can.
Hmm. Agreed.
It's a fundamental shift. It's hard. It takes time. Um, but yes, they can. How should success be evaluated from a customer perspective? Is it is the set of products delivering the outcomes that our customers want and the value that our organization needs?
Mm.
So again, we come back to desirable, feasible, viable.
Interesting you talk on that because I'm working with a rather large bank financial organization here. We both are actually here in Australia, and we're seeing this shift. This is probably the fourth year into this shift, and they're still evolving. They're learning, and there's been
Yeah.
a high degree of. It's safe to say there's been a whole lot of angst. There's been some lessons learned. Well, actually, quite a whole lot of lessons learned. There are things that have gone well and things that haven't gone well. But and I think one of the key things, and I think you're touching on this, Shane, is that they're learning from it. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
just all right. Here it is, bang. But we're learning from it. We're making mistakes, and
Mm.
it's okay, even though it
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah. That's safe to make mistakes, the safe to learn, to figure out what works, that there is no one size fits all, even in two value streams, two different product streams. Do not try and impose the same way of working. You will have some guidelines, and we, of course, again, come back to things like corporate governance. We've got to be good corporate citizens and so forth. But the way one value stream works could be very different to what another value stream does. And as long as they're both delivering the requisite value and customer outcomes, let the teams who are doing the work own the way of working. This can be a horrifying thought for people who have that 20th century follow the process mindset. And it's a shift. It's a big shift.
Yes, yes. I often, when I'm working with the product folk at this bank, I often refer to centralized planning, decentralized execution, and it's something that I've taken from a book, Team of Teams, which is Stanley McChrystal when he was, I think, commander of SOCOM in Afghanistan. Right? So the way I've pitched that is that we have to be able to have that understanding where we're heading to, we're on the same page, but be able to let the teams figure out how to realize the commander's intent, the vision. How do we figure that out? Otherwise, we're just feature factoring ourselves to death. We're just doing it the
Yeah.
same thing, different lipstick, as you mentioned before. So I'm just going to go back to something that Denise at the end of that. Um, sure, this organization that Shane and I are working with, it's a big organization. We're talking tens of thousands of people, and relative to Down Under, it's big. But what I'm noticing is that culturally, the organization is, hey, we're shifting to this, and you're starting to see it in some of the messaging that's going out. So there's a particular lift in a particular building, which I'm not going to mention. Every time I hop in the lift, they've got this message, which is it's essentially put ourselves in the customer's shoes, the way they think, and so forth. And they've got this picture of a real customer that they interact with. And it's a real nice message because that's really that product thinking, right? So what I've noticed is organizationally the messaging is X, but you're seeing this as you mentioned, Shane, that each of these different areas are starting to figure out how do we realize and align. And one of the key things or the key words I tend to use is how do we align to this thing here, whatever that thing is, the vision. And that's one of the key skills that we need to have as a product person is to be able to talk alignment, or sorry, identify the alignment, talk alignment, and then realize that alignment for our product or value stream space.
Yeah. So it's part of being in that wider, bigger overall value area. And yeah, that alignment is a beautiful way of thinking about it.
Nice.
The other thing, and you touched on it,
Mm.
is make the invisible visible. The all of the invisible work. In the Rock Crusher book, we talk about the back door. Because we know in every product team there is somebody within the organization who has got the authority to come in and say, hey, I want this, make it happen. Irrespective of, should it go through the product validation process, whatever, but it happens. So the advice we give in the book is, you've got a back door, make sure the back door is visible. That there are, in fact, rules around bringing extra work in that makes it visible that we can then have okay, now, yes, we've got to do this. What are we going to stop? Because what happens in organizations is that invisible work, can you just take a few minutes and do this for me? Or I need that as well while you're here. The people doing the work want to be helpful. And they're going to try and do it. And as you say, it removes capacity. So make that invisible visible.
Nice. Yep. Nice. I'm absolutely a huge fan of that. I've seen that with an organization, and I'll finish that part, tie that one up. An organization I work with in the utility space, and we absolutely had invisible work. In fact, one of the teams that we had 5 delivery teams at the time, but one of the teams we had, exactly as you described, business were coming to them like this way, right? They were coming through a whole bunch of doors which were invisible, but the thing is, they accepted the work because that's what we used to do, right? It's like this is the way it is.
And we want to be
But the
helpful.
downstream effects of this, yeah, we wanted to be helpful. That's it. It's not like we want to say no to everything. We want to be helpful. And that's a wonderful human trait. But there's a limit to this helpfulness if we want to be successful. Right? And I don't mean that in the context of, oh, we just have to ignore all requests. No, we need to find the appropriate response or appropriate way to respond to these different requests, which is that whole alignment piece that you talked about.
Yeah, and shameless self-promotion, the Rock Crusher book talks about how do we get stuff into the funnel, and also, and this is, I think, something that um, yeah, is well known but hasn't been well publicized. The concept we put in the Rock Crusher of the waste gate.
Hmm.
Our assertion is that 70%, well, up to 70% of the ideas that are coming in are probably not worth doing, and
Yes.
filtering that. And this is where your value management really comes in.
Yes. Yes.
So we're
Well.
we're coming close.
Hmm.
We've got 8 minutes left. Where do we start? If I am one of those people in an organization who's thinking about, okay, we want to go into this product space. Where do we start?
Good question. I think one of the things, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, is that recognition or buy-in from our leadership and the messaging that comes from them and the courage for them to be able to hold the course. Right? This is what we're going to do. We need to talk about the shift and how it's going to benefit the organization, the customer. Then we start to think about how we're going to implement these different frameworks in our appropriate context. And then I think one of the things with that, and this is tied in with what you said earlier with he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, the people, the people, is be able to give them that skills and the education, the training, if you will. And this is one of the areas that we sounds like a marketing plug here, but it sounds like one of those areas that we specialize in, right? It's that the training, the learning pathways. We provide that type of service because we recognize how important it is. Right? A doctor doesn't become a doctor because they go on ChatGPT or equivalent and say, teach me how to be a surgeon or a doctor. They go through training. Right? And it's the same sort of thing. Or I saw this really cool infographic, and most people have seen this as well. I thought it was amusing, and it's with a high degree of truth behind it on LinkedIn, which was professional athletes and so forth have high degrees of training leading up to an event. Whereas oftentimes we see in the corporate world, we're just doing the event and there's one spike of training. 2 years later, another spike of training. It's the constant learning, the constant education, the constant training, right? How do we become better in our craft? So I see it almost as this funnel thing. Start at the top, find out your message. What is it that you actually want to do? Realize that vision, and then start to filter those things. And all the other tools that you talked about in terms of value streams and so forth, then start to apply. Ultimately, it's about giving our skills to our people. But I'm going to swing this back to you, Shane, because what are you, based on your experience, what do you think we should be starting at?
Well, I am going to do the plug. The
Okay.
yeah, skilledDG.com. That's where Brian mentioned we have a wide range of training courses, product management, product ownership, and all of this, or everything that supports that. So there's the official plug, but you can find a lot more at our website. But the other things, um, talk about start start measuring outcomes, not outputs. Don't
Mm,
count the number of features. What value are our customers getting from them? What value are they delivering to us as an organization? Did business results improve? Did customers use these new features? Um, if you look at almost any product today, most of the features are never used.
Hmm.
Well, but we put a lot of time and effort into that. I mentioned start with one persistent cross-functional product team. Take a single value stream, give that team ownership, find a willing leader, a real product, and form that stable team around it. Give them a clear outcome to pursue, not a project brief, but an outcome to achieve. And then measure. Look at what's happening over the next 3 to 6 months. Also, look at what's happening around. Connect into communities. There are innumerable meetup groups around product ownership. There's the BVSH, yes, better value, sooner, faster, happier community around from John Smart's work. There's just, yeah, look at some of the references. And folks, we are going to, after this, we'll be sharing the video, of course, but we're going to have a blog post up, and in that blog post we'll have a list of references and books that you can draw upon as well. So wow, we're almost done.
Almost done. Look at that. Time has flown. It's been a good chat, Shane. I've really enjoyed it. There's some really good insights that you've given.
Our time is up. So,
Yes,
folks,
sir.
thank you so much. Yeah, feel free to connect with Brian and I on LinkedIn, and that website again, skillsdg.com.